There's been plenty of incredible playoff performances, which have rightfully gone down as both legendary and unforgettable. But there's even more which have been completely overlooked. So today we're back to take another deep dive into 5 of the more forgotten playoff performances in NBA history, starting with LaMarcus Aldridge in the first round of the 2014 playoffs. The 2006 NBA draft was kind to the Portland Trail Blazers, as they selected Brandon Roy and traded for LaMarcus Aldridge. And while Roy's career had come to a premature end, Aldridge had been a staple on the team for almost a decade. And now he had some help in second-year point guard Damian Lillard, as the 54 and 28 Blazers were making their first return to the playoffs since 2011, against a Houston Rockets team now featuring James Harden and Dwight Howard, a team that Aldridge had been dominating all season, as Rockets forward Terrence Jones was completely overmatched in most of their meetings. And while you knew that LaMarcus Aldridge could fill it up, he had also been dealing with back issues and missed a lot of games down the stretch, so you weren't sure if he'd be playing at 100%. But when Game 1 tipped off, LaMarcus Aldridge kicked off one of the greatest performances of his career. So Portland had come into Houston and stolen home court advantage with a 2-point win, and 31 points from Lillard played a big part in that. But when Aldridge saw Jones guarding him, he was thinking one thing.
That's barbecue chicken down there. Barbecue chicken.
And he knew it was time to get to work, starting with an impressive 12-point and 8-rebound first quarter. And while he had worked his way up to 16 points and 11 boards by halftime, he had also missed all 3 of his shots in the second. But by the end of the third, he was up to 24 points and 12 boards. Yet the Blazers were down by 6. And after 7 quick Rockets points to begin the fourth, Portland was in a 13-point hole. But then Aldridge took over, starting with a 3-pointer, then spending the rest of the quarter putting on a clinic and going 7 of 8 from the field for 19 points, with his final 2 points in the final seconds, sending the game to overtime.
And it's Matthews for the lead. No. Put back. No again. Tapped home.
And while he would foul out in the extra frame, the Blazers completed the comeback, and Aldridge had ended Game 1 with 46 points and 18 rebounds. But after barely escaping with a win, it didn't seem like they could get another win unless Aldridge again played out of his mind. So come Game 2, that's exactly what he did.
If he was on the playground, he would just scream rainbow. I mean, oh my goodness. Tell you what, when your mom's in the audience and you dropping jumpers like this, it's nothing better in the world.
Impressively, the Blazers had taken both in Houston, and Aldridge again poured in over 40 points, finishing another incredible performance with 43 points and 8 rebounds, and had done so while playing about 8 minutes less than he had in Game 1, making every shot count as he shot nearly 65% from the field. And without Aldridge, the game probably would have been over after the first quarter, as while Portland still trailed by 8 after 12 minutes, Aldridge had scored 11 of their 23 points, and would go on to score 12 in the second and 16 in the third, and would cap off another legendary performance with a huge fourth quarter dunk, as the Blazers were heading back to Portland up 2-0. But Game 3 came to an end, and the Rockets were right back in it with an overtime win. And Aldridge had struggled, as after getting off to a fast start in the first 2 games, he came out flat in Game 3, going 2 for 8 in the first half. And while he finished with 23 points and 10 boards, he shot just 8 of 22 from the field, and a 37-point performance from Harden was exactly what Houston needed to get back in the series. But Houston had also made some adjustments to deal with Aldridge, as while Aldridge wasn't the quickest, he was a technician down low, and had been using his solid frame and strength to get to his spots against the Houston forwards. So this game, Houston would put bigger bodies on him in Dwight Howard and Omer Ashik, and clearly it affected Aldridge. And after their Game 3 win, James Harden would say that the pressure was now on the Blazers going into Game 4. And if that was the case, could Portland handle it? Well, yeah, it looks like they could, as Portland finally broke the seal in Game 4 and became the first team to win at home in this series. But just like the 3 games before it, it had been a battle, as it was the 3rd game in the series to go to overtime. Aldridge had a modest first half, scoring 10 points, as the Blazers had fallen behind by 10 at the break. But a 13-point third quarter from Aldridge helped them cut that lead in half, Then while he took just 2 shots in the fourth, it was an all-around team performance, with 7 Blazers scoring in the final quarter, and a Nick Batum three-pointer with 5 minutes left gave Portland their first lead since early in the first. But a last-second Dwight Howard dunk would lead to overtime. And while Aldridge missed 2 crucial free throws, some of the less heralded Blazers came through to help Portland hold on, and Aldridge finished with an efficient 29 points and 10 rebounds, as he and Lillard were in sync on the offensive end. And on defense, Aldridge even rejected 4 shots, and now the Blazers were heading back to Houston with a chance to close it out. But when Portland needed him most, Aldridge went missing, turning in his worst game of the series by far. But it was a mixture of things. Houston showed from the beginning that if they lost, it wouldn't be because of Aldridge, as from the jump, they were sending double teams at him. But Aldridge also picked up 2 first-quarter fouls, and when he got back in the game, he couldn't find his rhythm against an aggressive Rockets defense, hitting just 3 of his 12 shot attempts and finishing with 8 points and 8 rebounds, with one positive being his second straight game with 4 blocks. And while the Blazers still had a game on the Rockets, they had lost by double digits. So now Houston had some momentum going back to Portland. But let's pick up late in Game 6, a freeze frame we've all seen and already know how it's going to end. But number 12 is a big reason why the game is this close. Yeah, Lillard has had the most efficient game, shooting over 50%, while hitting 5 threes up to this point. But the Blazers' leading scorer is Aldridge, as while he had gone cold in the fourth, his 30 points in the first 3 quarters helped keep Portland in it, while leading all players with 13 rebounds. And he had drained all 10 of his free throws. As this series was about to wrap up, with Aldridge averaging nearly 30 points and 11 rebounds, and completely carrying Portland to a 2-0 lead to begin the series. And for a guy who wasn't much of a shot blocker, he had averaged nearly 3 over the 6 games. But really quick, let's just get this out of the way.
It's Lillard. He got the shot off. Lillard, good! Good! And the Blazers win the series!
So there it is. Damian Lillard wins it. The first signature moment of his career. And unfortunately, a single moment that has overshadowed an all-time performance from Aldridge, as he led his Blazers out of the first round for the first time in 15 years. But while Aldridge was expected to be a focal point in this series, let's check out a player who took everyone by surprise. By the 02-03 NBA season, Troy Hudson was on his 4th team. But after a career year the season before with Orlando, he had gotten a multi-year deal from the Timberwolves, and had improved on last season as Minnesota's starting point guard this entire year. And while Minnesota had an MVP candidate in Kevin Garnett, when the Wolves drew the 3-time defending champion Lakers in round 1 of the playoffs, it definitely looked like it was going to be an uphill battle. And that looked to be confirmed after the Lakers came into Minnesota in Game 1 and routed the T-Wolves. But Hudson had finished with 17 points, albeit on subpar shooting. But then Game 2 happened, and all of a sudden, Troy Hudson made it a series.
Another Los Angeles turnover. 4-on-2. Hudson takes it himself. And Hudson the other way for the Timberwolves. And he'll unleash it.
And that's good, and I'm sure this makes Saunders very happy.
Hudson! Troy Hudson has gone mad!
I mean, Kobe's got 28 shots, 27.
Troy Hudson has put in 37 points. That is a game high.
So it was another blowout, but this time it was in Minnesota's favor, and the Wolves had Hudson to thank for that, as Hudson came out hot in the first quarter, and then hit a first-half buzzer beater to put the Wolves up by 16 heading into the break. And he just kept it going, making over 50% of his shots and draining 4 3-pointers, as he finished with a game and postseason career-high 37 points. And it was because he came out aggressive, and later acknowledged that good things happen when he plays like that. But he also knew when to give the ball up, as he would dish 10 assists in the process. But this is what the Wolves needed, as their usual second option Wally Szczerbiak was expending most of his energy trying to contain Kobe Bryant, so they needed their scoring from somewhere else. And while games like this weren't uncommon for Hudson, as he was known as a streaky shooter, the only question was if the streak could continue. But hold on, Back in LA, the Wolves outlasted the Lakers in overtime and had pulled that off without Garnett for basically the whole overtime period. But how did they even get to that point? Well, it was pretty close throughout, and while Garnett kept playing MVP level ball, Hudson was pouring in the points, as he finished this game with 27 and cashed in on all 8 of his free throws. But after LA fought back to tie it late, Hudson's potential game winner didn't fall, and while Hudson missed all of his shots in overtime, he still hit his 4 free throws, including 2 in the final seconds to ice the game, as the Wolves had taken a surprising 2-1 lead. And now going into Game 4, Lakers coach Phil Jackson admitted that they still hadn't figured out a way to get into Hudson, and essentially that he was abusing their defense in the pick and roll game, using that one play to get any shot he wanted. And that continued to ring true in Game 4, as Hudson was making his shots and was scoring great over the first 3 quarters, as he was also the Wolves' best 3-point shooter throughout the game. And going into the 4th, the Wolves were up by 3, but to begin the quarter, Hudson was on the bench, seemingly to get him fresher for when they needed him down the stretch. Except he didn't get back into the game until there was only about 6 minutes left, and over the rest of the game, the hot-handed Hudson got just 2 shot attempts and missed them both, as Minnesota would understandably put the game in Garnett's hands. Yet it was still surprising that Hudson had spent that much time on the bench. Yet he did still finish with 28 points. But with Kobe living at the free throw line in the 4th, the Lakers retook the lead and tied the series, heading back to Minnesota. So now Hudson was an X factor to the Wolves' success, but he came back down to earth in Game 5, as the Lakers put together a dominant offensive performance and won by 30. And after scoring 92 points over the last 3 games, Hudson would manage just 14 points this game, which all came in the first half, as second half double teams neutralized Hudson. And while he did add 7 assists, the reason Troy Hudson was on the court was to get your team points. But now the series was on the line, heading back to LA, and fans hoped that Hudson had another Game 2 in him. And did it ever look like he did after the first quarter, with Hudson dropping 14 points in the opening frame and leading Minnesota to a 5-point lead? But that was really all that Minnesota got from Hudson, as he would score 4 points the rest of the game. Yet his 18 points would still tie with Garnett for the team lead. But against the Lakers, that wasn't going to cut it, as the series ended in LA. So while it hadn't ended in victory, Troy Hudson had taken it to the defending champs, putting up one of the best stretches of his career and making sure that the Timberwolves made it a series. And for the rest of his life, he can tell the story of when the Los Angeles Lakers dynasty had no answer for him. But now let's take a trip back in time and look at a lesser talked about series with a theme we all love: revenge. Dale Ellis spent the first 3 years of his career with the Dallas Mavericks, understandably stuck behind Mark Aguirre and Rolando Blackman. But after a solid rookie season, he showed slight improvement in year 2. So when his minutes were cut in year 3, he was likely getting frustrated. But during that summer, he got out of Dallas via trade, joining the Seattle Supersonics and forming one of the league's best trios alongside Tom Chambers and Xavier McDaniel, while becoming a top 10 scorer in the NBA and winning Most Improved Player. And at 39-43, the Sonics squeaked into the playoffs, and as fate would have it, round 1 would put them against the heavily favored Mavs, a team who had had absolutely no problem versus Seattle during the regular season, winning each of their 5 matchups by double digits. But the Sonics were still confident, and Dale Ellis obviously had some extra motivation, taking on his old team. But then Mavs coach Dick Motta added a little more fuel to the fire, saying that Ellis could never replace Mavs star Rolando Blackman. So all that was left for Ellis was to let his play do the talking. And Ellis would do that to a degree in Game 1, putting up an efficient 22 points, yet being overshadowed by a 35-point performance from Chambers. But it didn't matter, since Seattle allowed 151 points in a blowout loss, so the series looked like it would eventually end with Dallas on top. Except now it's tied. It was a close one, but a win's a win, and it's one that wouldn't have happened without Ellis. After his 22-point Game 1, he put up 32 in Game 2, and it was a complete performance, as he added 6 rebounds and 6 assists. But in the final seconds, the game was tied, until Ellis was fouled, and as he would say, as soon as he knew he was going to the line, he knew it was over, draining both free throws to cap off a 10-point fourth quarter, as Seattle had stolen one in Dallas. Yet while it was a great offensive showing from Seattle, they also hadn't done much to slow down Dallas. So while this one did go in the win column, it hadn't been overly convincing, but the Sonics were hoping that they'd get another 32-point outing from Ellis back in Seattle. However, they wouldn't get 32 from Ellis in Game 3. No, they'd get 43. Ellis was unconscious, hitting nearly 65% of his shots, as everything had went perfectly to plan, with Ellis getting to all his spots and showing his knockdown shooting ability all game. But he also just looked like he wanted it more. As with Dallas big man James Donaldson hobbled from a leg injury, Ellis took advantage and swooped in for a game-high 14 rebounds, with 8 of those coming on the offensive glass. And with Ellis scoring 22 first-half points, Seattle got out to a huge lead by the break. Then even though Dallas outscored them in the third and fourth quarter, Seattle's lead was big enough that they still made it out with a double-digit victory. And now a lot of people were believing that they could actually beat this team. And that's what Ellis had his eyes set on. Game 4 would be Ellis's quietest, as while he made over 50% of his shots, he only scored 21 points, as Dallas was making sure not to let him have another huge night. Yet although I haven't really mentioned them, the other 2 members of the trio, in McDaniel and Chambers, had been doing their thing all series as well, and would combine for 60 points in Game 4. And the series was over, as Seattle hadn't just beat Dallas, they had humiliated them, with their defense being the most surprising element, as they had pushed Mavs star Mark Aguirre out to the perimeter and held him to just 13 points. So Dale Ellis had gotten his revenge on his former team, and especially on Dick Motta. And while Blackman had nothing to do with Motta's earlier comments regarding Ellis and Blackman, Ellis still made sure to outplay his former teammate, as Dale Ellis had just turned in the greatest playoff series of his career, for a Sonics team who made a Cinderella run to the conference finals in '87. But now let's jump ahead and check out a guy who also upset the Dallas Mavericks in the playoffs. But that's not the series we're going to look at. While Baron Davis's role on the We Believe Warriors is probably his most well-known, 5 years earlier he had an incredible first-round series versus Orlando that doesn't get mentioned as often. Davis was coming off his first career All-Star selection, and with a win in the season finale, the Hornets had clinched home court advantage for their first-round series against a Tracy McGrady-led Orlando Magic team. And while McGrady had a great series in his own right, Davis was doing everything for the Hornets, and was doing it with a heavy heart, as his grandmother was recovering from a stroke. Going into Game 1, Davis hadn't drawn the easiest assignment, as while the Magic's starting point guard was Darrell Armstrong, the 6'8" McGrady would say that he was planning to guard the 6'3" Davis for the series. So let's see how he'd fare with the height disadvantage. And while it definitely wasn't pretty, the Hornets had somehow ended Game 1 with a lead in the series. And it was pretty much because of Davis. Orlando had led for the whole game, and entered the fourth quarter with an 11-point lead. But after putting up just 8 points in the first half, Davis dropped 10 in both the third and fourth quarters, while also adding 7 rebounds, 7 assists, and 3 steals. And the final steal would save the game.
It dropped to McGrady, picked up by Lynch. McGrady.
With Davis knocking it away from McGrady in the final seconds to make up for an earlier turnover. But it was still going to be an uphill battle, as the Hornets' Jamal Mashburn had left the game in the final minutes and would not return for the series. So Davis had a lot on his shoulders going into Game 2. But Game 2 was a disappointment. Outside of a great performance from Eldon Campbell, the Hornets were having trouble getting their shots to fall, and that applied to Davis as well. In his defense, he was dealing with back spasms that affected his explosiveness. But by halftime, he had 4 points and had made just 1 of his 4 shots, and the Hornets were down big. But they did fight back in the second half, and Davis even went for 7 points and 7 assists in the fourth quarter, as the Hornets would force overtime. But the Hornets had gone 1 of 12 from the field in the extra period, and while Davis still put up 11 points and 10 assists, Orlando had tied the series. And if Davis's back continued bothering him, the Hornets didn't have much of a chance. Okay, so here we are at the end of Game 3. 0.7 seconds, and the Hornets seemingly having a chance to win the game. But let's look at what Davis did to get them to this point. So first of all, it was more than back spasms, as he had been diagnosed with a back strain, which makes his Game 3 performance even more impressive. Mostly because all he did up to this point was put up 24 points, 11 rebounds, and 9 assists, while adding a couple steals and committing 0 turnovers. So it was already a career game, and it should have ended in regulation. So let's roll it really quick.
Davis at the buzzer. No, it's waved off. Bernie Fryer says no, it will not count.
There it is. A pretty obvious game-winning three-pointer by Davis. But hold on. The refs waved it off? It seems pretty clear that he made it, but the refs said no, as apparently it just wasn't possible for Davis to catch and get the shot off in 0.7 of a second. And at this time, the refs say was final say, as there was no instant replay review. But this would actually be one of the specific shots that led to the league adopting instant replay review beginning in the following season. But now this game had to go to overtime. But no worries, in front of the Orlando crowd, Davis dropped 9 points in the overtime period, while McGrady went scoreless, as Davis's final stat line saw him finish with 33 points, 14 rebounds, and 10 assists, and the Hornets were 1 win away from the second round. And going into Game 4, McGrady had been stripped of defensive duties on Davis after giving up the triple-double, and while he would guarantee that there would be a Game 5, he didn't exactly sound confident about it. Yet he did sound confident in saying he was the best player in the series, and was better than Baron Davis. But Davis wasn't stressing, and even though he would say that he didn't have to prove anything, his play in Game 4 said otherwise. Oh wait, a triple-double? This must be a Game 3 headline. Nope, this is from Game 4. Davis had turned in his second consecutive triple-double. This time it was 28 points, 11 rebounds, and 10 assists, while adding 3 steals. And Davis had only needed regulation to get it, as Charlotte took Game 4 in a blowout, with a 10-point third quarter from Davis helping stave off an Orlando comeback attempt, with Charlotte going on to run away with it in the fourth, as Davis had nearly averaged a triple-double for the series, while adding almost 3 steals per game. And in a display of toughness, even with his back issues, he averaged over 46.5 minutes a night, as this had wrapped up one of the best playoff performances from one of the most underrated playoff performers. And now to end it off, we'll check out a former teammate of Davis's, who had something to prove going into a 1998 second-round series. Eddie Jones had been a good swingman for the Lakers since entering the league in 1994, but by 1998, the team had big expectations, as they now had the league's most dominant player in Shaquille O'Neal, and Jones had a second-year guard breathing down his neck. But the Lakers had won 61 games this year, and were definitely contenders. But Jones had been underwhelming in the playoffs, as he had struggled in last year's second-round loss to Utah, and hadn't fared much better this year in LA's first-round win over Portland. So going into their semi-finals matchup with a 61-win Seattle Supersonics team, Jones needed to show something, but it wasn't looking good after Game 1, with Gary Payton holding Jones to 9 points on 3 of 10 shooting, and the Lakers suffering an embarrassing loss to the Sonics, with Jones and Bryant seeming visibly frustrated with each other at certain points. And overall, the entire Lakers backcourt was looking rough. But luckily, in Game 2, Eddie Jones came to life. So for the second straight game, the Lakers' top-ranked offense only managed 92 points. But this time it was okay, because their defense completely shut Seattle down. And with Kobe missing the game with the flu, Jones found his flow in the offense, and the shots were falling. As while Shaq led the team with 26 points, Jones was right behind him, with a playoff career-high 23 points on 7 of 13 shooting. And the man recently named second-team All-Defense also helped hold Gary Payton to 12 points on about 35% shooting. And all of a sudden, the Lakers were in a great spot, heading home with the series tied. The Lakers were still without Kobe in Game 3, but they had nothing to worry about, because Eddie Jones had found his shot in Game 2, and now he couldn't miss, as he set a new postseason career high with 29 points, and did so on 12 of 17 shooting, while draining 4 threes. As with the Sonics rightfully putting most of their defensive attention in Shaq, Jones was ready for the kickouts, and he would continue proving his all-defensive status with 4 blocks. And his huge 20-point first half was the reason that the Lakers held a lead at the break, a lead which they just built on in the second half, as they took a 2-1 lead. And with a couple good performances from Jones, he finally looked to be shedding his reputation as a poor playoff performer. And Shaq looked to finally have some postseason help. But with Kobe back for Game 4, could Jones keep it going? And the answer to that is absolutely. But to be fair, Kobe only played about 3 minutes, but Jones played about 43. And for the 3rd consecutive game, he set a new playoff career high, with 32 points on about 57% shooting. And while last game had been a block party for Jones, he became a thief in this one, finishing with 4 steals. And the Lakers won another game convincingly, as their Game 1 loss was looking more and more like an outlier. And all they had to do was take care of business one more time on the road, and they'd be returning to the conference finals for the first time since the Showtime days. Lakers coach Del Harris kept going with the hot hand in Game 5, as Bryant only got about 11 minutes, with a good portion of those minutes coming when the game was out of reach, which was pretty early, as the Lakers got out to a 17-point first quarter lead. Jones wasn't able to continue his string of playoff scoring highs, as he finished with just 17 in this game, but still shot 50% and went 7 of 7 from the free throw line in the 4th quarter alone. And he remained an X factor on defense, as although Gary Payton had 20 points, he needed 16 shots to get it, as the Lakers wrapped up their 4th straight win with ease and were advancing to take on Utah. And if you're wondering why Jones suddenly became so aggressive, you can give the credit to his mom, who didn't like the way people were talking about him during the Lakers' first round series. But the playoffs ended with the Lakers being swept by the Jazz, and Jones would be traded away during the following season. But he was still a big part in the Lakers returning to the conference finals, and would go on to have some great years after leaving LA. And I think that's where we'll end it off, on another deep dive into some forgotten playoff performances. Let me know what you think in the comments, what you liked and what you didn't, and maybe some future suggestions. But for now, thanks for checking out the video, subscribe if you're new, and if you haven't already, take a look at the first installment of this series. See you next time.